Rain claws at the windows as Roger Waters sits by himself at his apartment in London. Long shadows are cast on record shelves, and ancient ghosts by a lone, feeble lamp in the corner. Like a voice that used to shout but now merely breathes, his bass rests silently next to him. He senses it once more. That mixture of jealousy and pride. Pink Floyd altered music, redefined sound, and rocked the world. However, he finally acknowledges to himself a reality he has always detested speaking aloud on this stormy night, when there is no one around and no noise. A few bands in particular rose even higher in his heart. The Who is the first thing that crosses his anxious mind. However, the recollection doesn't come easily tonight. It strikes him like a straightforward blow from Moon. Because adoration was never enough with the Who. It was competition. Jealousy had been honed to a point. It was the sour realization that kids could be impulsive, untamed, and destructive yet still be loved for it. He recalls how, as though the world owed him its acclaim, Townshend would jump into the air and smash his guitar into splinters. Although it was painful for Roger to acknowledge it, he secretly hoped he could follow suit. Set everything on fire. Allow pandemonium to spill out of him with no repercussions. Rather, he created flawless conceptions and flawless sound architecture, only to be called out by reviewers for the unvarnished truth. Roger always felt a coil of heat and venom in his chest when he saw them live. Envy, not hatred or even resentment. Envious of their liberty, their insanity, and the fact that the world overlooked their breakage while he was supposed to remain intact. Roger would sometimes look at the ceiling of another hotel room and wonder which version of Pink Floyd he wanted he could have been, and which version the world needed more of. Pink Floyd created universes that broke reality. It was not that they were kind giants. Not at all. The Woe were a band on the verge of collapse, chaotic anarchy and amplifiers. Roger recalls seeing them live for the first time. Keith Moon was playing drums like a man whose life depended on escaping the darkness, while Pete Townshend was slashing at his guitar, as if he were attempting to eradicate every uncertainty that had ever existed inside of him. Their music wasn't heavenly or pure. No, it was raw, brutal, and insane. But there was truth in that savagery. Universes were created by Pink Floyd. They were broken by the Who. Roger was impressed by that carelessness and resistance to control. While he bore the burden of perfection, concept, and structure, he envied their ability to blow out on stage without regret. The Who were unforgettable because their fire was louder than fear and brighter than reason. 30 years later, I still see obstacles that need to be removed in order for us to face the reality of our life. Waters' thoughts shift toward a different type of seismic force as the storm changes and the thunder becomes less intense. The Rolling Stones are one that was founded on revolt rather than mayhem. The Stones would be a slow, ravenous, and relentless wildfire if the Who were a lightning bolt. As he crept into small London clubs, Roger recalled seeing MC Jagger move like temptation itself, and Keith Richards' guitar growl with a sort of lovely corruption. Pink Floyd provoked thought. People wanted the Stones. They elevated peril into the public eye, transformed wickedness into art, and never expressed regret for any of it. They had a quiet but acerbic rivalry with Pink Floyd. They were two different worlds. The philosophers were Floyd, the sinners were the Stones. Floyd created soundscapes. Revolutions were forged by the Stones. Waters detested their excess, haughtiness, and disorder. However, he also yearned for the liberty they represented. They taught him that accuracy wasn't always the key to finding truth in music. It occasionally resided in the mess. Roger's thoughts turned to the band that created the concept of potential. When that mental wildfire finally goes out, the Beatles were everything that Pink Floyd wasn't. Where Floyd was brooding, bright. Where Floyd was calculating, humorous. And where Floyd was cosmic, hopeful. Roger recalls hearing about A Day in the Life for the first time, and coming to the explosive realization that music could have no boundaries. The Beatles didn't do what everyone else did. They relocated it. Their ideas were revolutionary, and their melodies were bold. Floyd defied the norms with force, but they did so elegantly. Roger felt amazement rather than resentment as he envied them. The Beatles created a sense of inevitability around innovation, rather than merely innovating. They were the band that, like a bolt of lightning, tore across the planet. Roger's bones ached when he saw them live for the first time. Keith Moon played drums as if he were outrunning death, while Pete Townshend battered his guitar with the ferocity of a man battling God. They lacked polish in their songs. It was a riot, a confession, a scream, and unadulterated electricity. Roger admired their boldness. insanity, and imperfections. The Who burned their building, whereas Pink Floyd sculpted sound-like structures. Their music was not something they wanted to control. Their goal was to live through it. Roger was always envious of that liberty. Pink Floyd's genius came with duty, weight, and expectations. However, The Who's genius burst like fireworks. It was fleeting, dazzling, and unforgettable. Inside Roger, the storm only gets darker, harsher, and more merciless as the storm outside calms to a drizzle. He now breathes more heavily, as though every breath he takes bears the ghosts of all the rivalries he pretended to be unconcerned about for his whole life. Stiffly, he gets up and makes his way to his old audio system. Decades of hands that trembled with brightness and bitterness have left the wood chipped, the knobs loose, and the surface worn. He takes out a cracked copy of Abbey Road on vinyl and holds it in the same manner as someone holds the truth they have been avoiding for years. The sound that fills the room when he puts down the needle is so warm and familiar that it nearly hurts. However, comfort is always accompanied by a knife, since Roger senses it as soon as the first notes emerge. Envy increased that pain of appreciation. The Beatles' invention pierces him like light piercing a blank space. How easily they changed the regulations that he had to violate with blood. How effortlessly they produced universes that he had meticulously designed over the course of years. He is exposed by their brightness and feels every weakness he has struggled to conceal. The borders of his pride are burned by the heat of the Stones. Their anarchy, instinct, and wildness. All of it makes him think of the freedom he never gave himself. They lived like suddenly erupting volcanoes. They made rebellion seem alluring, even if he created empires only to watch them crumble under the weight of brilliance and ego. He portrayed it as sorrowful. And the Who, their disarray, their wrath, their inability to control the fire, and their unpredictability, all reverberate in him like a wound reopened. They were all that he was forbidden to be. As they recklessly destroyed stages, he destroyed himself in an attempt to keep Pink Floyd together. They were insanely brilliant. It was his duty. The contrast still hurts. He wasn't merely shaped by these bands. He was plagued by them. Even in triumph, they towered above him, haunted his desire, and murmured in his failures. They were the shadows, constantly out of his grasp. Pink Floyd always felt their breath on the back of his neck, no matter how high he flew. No one else dared to travel to the galaxies that Pink Floyd did. Yes, but galaxies are silent, lonesome, and frigid. He learned more than space from these three bands. Humility. They reminded him that he wasn't the first person to fly, and showed him how to construct the rocket. It stops raining. The world becomes quiet. With his hands in his pockets and the streetlights painting him in gold, Roger stands at the window. Only his silhouette is visible against the gentle, quivering glow of London's night, as the room behind him disappears into the shadows. For a brief moment, he appears older than time itself, older than all of his songs and memories combined. They weren't just better, they were necessary, he says in a whisper to the silent. Like a confession he's kept hidden for half a lifetime, the words flow from his mouth. Heavy with resignation and honesty, they float into the quiet air and hang there. A delicate heartbeat reverberates across the dark room, as the record continues to spin, crackling quietly. Every pop of the record is like a new memory coming back. The universe opened up as he heard Lennon's voice for the first time. Jagger made rebellion sound divine for the first time. Townshend crushed his guitar the first time, as if he were breaking fate itself. Roger shuts his eyes in appreciation rather than defeat. Thank you to the titans that came before him, and tore down the barriers he would eventually push even higher. Thank you to the legends who illuminated the way with their radiance and craziness. Thank you to the bands that ventured where he was once afraid to go. He lets out a shaky, nearly amused exhale. Roger finally comes to terms with something he previously refused to acknowledge in this peaceful room. Despite all the battles that took place inside Pink Floyd, the cracks and fights, and the wounds that he never entirely recovered from, being great is not a throne. In the dark, a torch is handed from hand to hand. He finally lets himself utter what he has always known, but never said out loud tonight in the silence of his London house. These three bands transformed him, but Pink Floyd altered the world. And for the first time in years, Roger Waters feels serenity, weird, soft, and real settle over him, like the final note of a song that has taken a lifetime to finish.